Alright, I am going to make BB code. So to start the process, you have to have your character picture ready and preferably a background if you want. If you do not want a background, you need to have a series of colors chosen for your code. Whatever you want, whichever you think would look better with your character. To start with a background that is an image and something that you want to kind of enhance your character's sheet is the div code. And once you memorize the one that's available now, like the one that I'm about to write, it becomes pretty easy to remember. So if you want it to be a background, you put div equals background colon URL if you have the image. And you right click, copy image address, and then paste it. Close the parentheses. And then if you want the image to stay still, well, the image would stay still. But if you want the background to move as people are scrolling on the page, you hit fixed, or you type fixed, and it'll keep the image, with whoever is scrolling on the page. If you don't, simply just don't include it. After that, after the colon, don't close the bracket, you have to include all of the specs of the whole background setup that you wish to include. So if you want background, the background size, if you want the image to fully take up the space, you're going to put fill or fit, and depending on what you want, but I normally use fill so that there's no empty space and it doesn't get bigger as you make your code bigger. After changing the background size, you can make a border if you want. For now, I will use a 5 pixel wide solid black border. And if you want to give your border a fun background, or not background, design, aside from changing solid to dotted or inset, outset, whatever, you can change the border radius. So if you make it 25 pixels, it will have rounded edges instead of square edges, which is my preference. After doing your border and doing the border radius, the background size, and setting up the background, what you can do is the padding. The padding is necessary simply because you don't want it to fill the entire space of the post. You want it to have like a little bit of, elbow room on the sides, just so it doesn't feel overwhelming. And it should make it easier for you. I think that's it for this part. I'm gonna check one of my older ones just to make sure that I have it right. Let's go this. Yeah, the background URL, fixed, background size. Oh, I use cover, not fill. That's important because you want it to cover the entire thing. I think fill stretches it out way too much. Border radius, border, and padding. Yeah, like I said, that's it. And you're not going to close that div code until the very end. So that's not what I wanted to do. Stop it. So I'll just use this one. So you close it, and at the very end, you'll just have your div closed. So now this should have a nice div code, and you can see as I scroll, it doesn't move. That's what I meant to say. It does not move, which gives it it gives it a cool effect, I think. And you can see the borders are nice and rounded. I think if you make it smaller, it becomes less rounded, and if you make it bigger, it becomes more rounded. So like 50 pixels should make it, let's see, should make it, oh no, other way around. 50 is super boxed, and then if you make it like 10, what the hell? Oh, the inset thing is on. There you go. If you do that, nope, I don't know. Just make it 25 if you want rounded edges. I don't remember how it goes, but yeah. And that'll get the round. What the fuck happened? What did I do? Oh, I know what I did. Okay. The pixel got erased because of the thing. So maybe 50 pixels does make it more rounded? It does. Okay. It just brings the rounded part in much farther. So if you wanted it to be even bigger, there you go. Much more rounded. I do not want it that rounded though, so I'm going to put it back to 25. After doing your basic div background setup, you are going to need 3 main pages that I have bookmarked here in my roleplay tab that are very important for generating your CS. If you want it to have a cool looking effect going on with a scroll and a pretty title and the background and the image, then you're going to need to pick your colors of your font, your little shaded background if you don't want it to be white or black, like these all are. This is all white. This one's black. This is what they look like because you changed the opacity. Oh my god, I'm getting messaged. What are you? Oh. Anyway. After that, so I'm going to pick a font meme for my character. She is a drow who is going to be a type of priestess. So I'm going to go with a really fancy, pretty, but not like fancy. I want cursive type font. But you have to make sure you do text generator and then choose one of the categories. And then you can enter your text here. So once I think of a name for her, it'll go here, and you can choose which one you want it to look like. So let's say I use Moonlight Shadow and I make her name let's go with Medallia Sylvestra. Just for now. I don't know if I'm going to keep it. But then you hit generate and it gives you what it would look like. And I think I really like this one. So, I'm going to keep it. But because this is a dark blue, it would not show up at all on the beautiful background that I've chosen. So you simply click this and you can change it to whatever color you want. I'm just going to make it white for simplicity's sake, and it won't show up because it's white. Just take the link, go back to your code, center the image because everything looks better centered, and then close the image code and the center code. Then, when I preview it, it shows up, and it looks beautiful. I think it looks great. So I'm going to hold on to Medallia Sylvestra. I might change the color of the font later, but we will see. I might make it a silver color. So now that I'm done with her beautiful font meme, actually I think I might make the borders more curved. I think I like that. I'm gonna go with the stupid. Let's go with 50. Let's just try out 50 for a while. No, let's go full 100. I liked it. Alright, so I'm gonna stick with 100 pixels. It's nice and rounded out. It looks beautiful. After the image, if you want to have two separate columns, one for the image and one for your text, you simply have to use the row. Oh, it does not need to be in all caps. The row code, which will give you the ability to make multiple columns. So you start with row, and then you make your columns. The entire span of your post is going to be 8. I don't know why, but it's 8. So if you want to do half and half, you just do span 4. And then it'll take up half of this space, and then the other one will take up half of the other space. But I don't want to because the picture isn't that big of a deal. I want more room for my text. So I'm going to make the span 5 because we're going to start with the text, and we're going to insert a code that I have saved in my macros. This scroll code is best to just copy and paste. I don't have it all memorized. I'm never going to have it all memorized. It's too much. So, take away the code, you don't need that. But this code right here is used to make that gorgeous scrolling inside a text box that doesn't have the ugly scroll bar. So this code will give you that. What it means, I don't know. But if you want the text box to be as tall as the picture, you change the height here. So I'm going to assume that my picture is going to be about 450 pixels tall. So I'm going to change it. And then when it comes to background, this is where you do it. So if I want my text to be white or silver, I'm still thinking about it, I'm going to make my background stay this nice black color. Black is all zeros, white is all Fs. You can also find that out from here. All white F, all black. So after inserting that code, the background size is still cover because you want that color to cover the entire background you have. And fill that up. You want it to be that way. The padding is now twice the padding here because you don't want this to touch the edges of this. You want it to be inside. Opacity, or opacity, however you pronounce it, affects how see-through it is on your background. So we're going to keep it 0.6 just to see for now. And we're going to leave everything else alone. Inside the div code, I'm going to start my code for the actual text. So of course, center it. I think it looks prettier that way. And then you're going to have your font, your color, and your size. I do not have any of these yet, so I did not fill them in. The color is likely going to be white, just to match with this to see how it goes. But because the black is opaque, the white's going to be off-white. It'll probably be a little bit gray, which is probably what I'm going to change the title to. The size, I want it to be nice and legible, so I'm going to pick 5 just for now, but that's where Google Fonts comes into play. Google Fonts provides you with all of the fonts that are accepted by RP Nation. So I'm going to scroll through here, find one that's legible, not that one. Find one that's legible, but also pretty, because I'm making a priestess, and she's the epitome of beauty and grace and elegance, if I feel like making her that way. So you just scroll through until you see a font that you feel suits your character. But the cursive ones generally are difficult to read for people other than you. Even if you can read it, that does not mean everybody else can. So make sure you're taking other people into consideration with what you write. So Yanon Kafizats looks pretty good, but I might pick another one. So I can add this to the ones I'm looking at and keep going, which is nice because I'm not going to remember Yanon Kafizats every single time. I want to go back to it. this would be an example of what not to use, because this, while beautiful and very similar to, you know, writing with a pen, a quill instead of a pen, or older fountain pens, it is not that legible to people who can't read cursive. So I think I'm going to choose a nice font that indicates, not this, that indicates her professionalism, but is also legible, unlike that one. I've often used Lobster too. People can read that pretty well, but I'm gonna go for one that I feel would be better for this character. This one's good, but it's way too small. You also have to consider size when picking your font, because if you pick one that is super tiny, even at size 7, it's going to be small and hard to read. You also want to consider how it's going to look if you italicize it, bold it, or underline it. Because if I bolded this, it would be incredibly difficult to tell if it was bold or not. I think I'm going to choose Bad Script, ironically, with this name, because it looks nice and I think it suits the character. So you type it in word for word with all the proper capitalizations and put it in there. So now I have my font, my color, and my size. And I'm just going to put insert text here just as a placeholder while we set up the rest of the code. Make sure you close each and every one of the codes you use, because it can lead to disastrous results. I know from experience. I like to keep just a little, separation between these, just hitting enter, keeping the divs separate so that the bottom of your text isn't touching the div code. But once that's done, you can close your column and then you start the next one. And it can stay all together, it doesn't matter. So in this case, my text is going to be on the left side, and if you keep it in line with the next column, it will keep them in line on your post, which is nice. So for the picture, a nice technique I like to do to give it that opaque feeling and give it the border, of a div, I treat it like I treat the background. I insert div background URL. I'll go and copy the link, copy the image address, and I'll paste it. I don't need it to be fixed because it's her picture. It's not going anywhere. It's going to look the same no matter what angle I want people to look at it. So, because I'm doing that, I am going to set things up in a nice and neat way. The background here, I think, is still cover, but let me check. Because she's on the left. Yes, so it's still cover. Just treat them all the same. It's easy to remember that way. And then border, I want it to be the same as the background, but maybe with a thinner border. Also, you can give a border to your text box too, so I'll do that too. Just give it a border. I'll give it 2 pixels, width solid black, and the border radius will also be 100 pixels because I want to have that consistency. So the border radius here will be 100 pixels. And then it will also have a padding of 5 pixels. Or let's go with 10 pixels. Make sure it fits the whole look. Always present each part of the code with the colon and then end it with a semicolon. Now, because the height of this is going to be as small as possible unless you change it, you have to insert it, preferably before padding. So height, I'm going to make it 450 pixels, and even though they are the same size, it doesn't mean that they're going to show up the same size, no matter how much you might want it to. So The height is 450 pixels. Border radius is 100. Border is 2 pixels, solid black, and everything else looks to be in order. So you just do that and make sure to separate the beginning code with the ending of the code so that it doesn't try to complete it all in one line. Then you close the column, and that's where you can close the row. Now I did put the ending of the div code here just to make sure it stayed out of the way, but I wouldn't forget about it. But now that I've finished the rest of the code, I think it should be pretty okay. So now I'm going to press preview again, and it loaded in the character image. Now it showed her very big face. She has a very big face. I want it to show more, but this picture ended up being rather large. So instead of just 450 pixels, I might make it different. I might change the code to fit instead of cover and see what happens. Or fill. I don't know if it's fit or fill. Let's see. Ooh, that is not what I want. It's good to experiment with your code so you can see what happens depending on what you do. Yeah, that's just the same thing. So I will change it back to cover, but I will change the height to 600 pixels and see what happens. Now it's given me much more of the character's visual. This is exactly what I want. But I do want there to be more space between the bottom of her code and the div code, so I am going to just give that extra space and make it more present here because I don't want everything touching. It just doesn't look as good. But you can see the insert text here. It looks good. I'm going to make it taller because I feel like it would just look nicer. Also, don't give it the border because I forgot. I made the background also black, so it's going to be opaque. So I think I'll just get rid of the border there. If you do end up, but it is beneficial for me to show you how, because if you do end up wanting a border, now you know how to do it. So I'm also going to remove the border from her picture because I'm going to make her opaque. I'm going to make her little profile thing opaque. So I'm going to give it the same opacity or opacity, whatever, of the text. And we're going to see what that looks like. See, I like it. Oh, wait, I need to give it. I'm giving them back their codes because I want them to have that that pretty curved border. But now you can see that she does have a see-through effect, and I think it looks gorgeous. So I'm going to undo the things I deleted if it will let me. Nope. All right. Well, that's all right. I'll just fix it anyway. So putting it back in. Background, I'm adding the border is 2. I'm going to make it even smaller because I don't want it to really show up, but I need it there so that I can do a border radius and give it that look that I want. So I'll just copy this and I'll paste it here for the background. And then I'll give her back her opacity. But you can see that her opacity looks more opaque than the text does. So what you can do is make her less opaque, so more visible, or make this more opaque. I like how opaque she looks, so I'm going to make the text more opaque. Now I believe the smaller the number, the more opaque it is, yes. So this became a little bit lighter, and I think that's the perfect level of opacity that I want. So I'm going to make this 0.5 and this one 0.6. Now to see and make sure that the scroll really does work, I'm just going to add plenty of space, and but there is still text to be seen at the bottom, just to make sure that the scroll is in functioning order. You can't see it here, but if you scroll, now you can see it. And there's no ugly scroll bar. Now, to make them even, you can start by giving them the same height. So this one will need 600, but when you hit preview, they're not necessarily, in this case they are, as for the moment, but they're not always necessarily going to have the same height. So it's always important to make sure that you change it. Now I think I'm going to change her name just to make it more, you know, more like the theme of the character. So I'm going to start with this nice silvery gray and see how that looks and see if it works with the font. So we'll just paste that in there. It's just more character touch-ups, and oh, it matches beautifully. So I'm going to stick with this. I think I like how it looks, and that's it. There's plenty, there's this, and you still have the text down here. That's pretty much it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.